Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I will be your host today. My guest today is Patrick Moody. Really enjoyed the conversation with a gentleman that spends his daytime hours working as a professional lawyer, as a prosecutor with the state of Montana. Very cool to see, though, how he uses his backdrop of living in such a cool state as Montana as a way to get to the outdoors and pursue different adventures. We talk through the different things he's done around the world, including having access to standby flights for a year where he could fly anywhere, and he took full advantage of that. But at this point, in really focusing on spending time in the wildernesses that he can get to through a quick drive, or even running trails right out at his backyard. So it was a very cool conversation with a guy that is clearly living intentionally to make sure that he is integrating adventure into his life as a priority. Patrick does a great job of explaining why he does that and what he gets out of pursuing hard things in his life. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Patrick Moody. Patrick Moody, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. We are live and ready to go. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you're just telling me very good timing of finishing up your court cases this morning. So I appreciate you being here this morning, and probably even from that little reference, people are going to wonder just what kind of adventures do attorneys get themselves into. So I'm sure we'll jump into that. But let's start with tell folks a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and where you live.
Sure. My name is Patrick Moody. I live in Helena, Montana. I try and balance work and play by both being a trial attorney and stick to my ski bum roots and get outside as much as physically possible. So that means distance running, mountaineering, backpacking, trying to get into the backcountry skiing nowadays, and hopefully just making mistakes wherever I can in the woods.
So tons of questions about all those things, but as far as the stuff out your back door, literally how quickly can you be somewhere and be deep into the backcountry?
I hate to give out the secret, but Montana is a wonderful place to live. I'm incredibly fortunate here in Helena. We have this extensive trail network. So I have to run 2 houses and then I'm at my trailhead, and I can run for 21 miles without having to cross a road. It is a magical, magical experience. And that's just one city in Helena, or one city in Montana.
Wow. Is that why you picked Helena, or is that something that was a nice surprise?
That was a nice surprise. The job, when I first got hired, said, "You're going to move to Helena." And I said, I'd love to move to Helena. It's one of my favorite places. But I would say that is not out of the norm for most Montana cities. Usually you have to drive about 10 minutes to get to a trailhead. Here, it's literally out the back door. It's a pretty good place.
Yeah, so you told me on our intro call that we need to do our best to keep the secrets of Montana a secret. So we'll try not to bring too much of a spotlight to a beautiful state. But, all joking aside, I think there is, I know several folks that have either grown up in that area or have family that live there or have visited. And I've never heard a negative phrase about it. I'm sure there's some negativity and you probably see a lot of it within the court system, but as far as the landscape goes, have you found a bad area, or are there certain areas of the state where you kind of gravitate towards?
The western part, for those who have been to Colorado, is relatively similar to where mountains are in the west, and the east is a bit more rolling hills. And even then, it's still just stunning out there. The trail running opportunities are really unique. The people are good no matter where you go, though. I think there's a lot of animosity in the state of all the people moving in. Have lived here for almost 20 years, and I'm still not sure I am considered a true Montanan at this point, but it's going to be home, and I certainly recommend anyone visit it, especially during the summer months when it's a bit more comfortable temperatures. I started a run yesterday, and I think about 8 degrees outside.
Yeah, that's chilly.
It got up to 22. It was quite nice by the end of
it. How did you get into trail running? Were you a runner growing up?
No, not at all. I have had some interesting challenges in life where turns out I have a debilitating arthritis, and I couldn't figure out why it was always so painful to run
Oh, wow.
up until I think it was 2019. It went bad, and my knees swelled to the size of cantaloupes, and I couldn't walk for about 6 weeks or 6 months, excuse me. And now that I'm on excellent medication, I just kind of wanted to start trying something new and something unique. It always drove me nuts how slow you walk when you're backpacking. And now I can see the same things that would take me days on days to see in less than one day. So I picked up trail running at the perfect timing when COVID came in, and I just started hitting my really long distances.
Have you done any races, or is it usually just for your own enjoyment?
Not a big race person. Kind of the joy of the running is just getting off into the woods by myself. But I've done a couple of the local ones. If anyone ever wants to come to Helena, the Don't Fence Me In is truly one of the best trail race experiences I've ever had. And
Really?
then I've enjoyed the Spartan races. It's just a fun way to stop every once in a while and do some burpees.
Yeah. Who doesn't love some burpees? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now you grew up in Colorado though, right? Not
I
Montana.
did. I did. I was born in Colorado, and when I was one, we were forced to move out of state because that was one of the difficult economic times. And I think that may have started the love for the mountains right there. My family spent 8 years trying to get back to Colorado and hyping it up and hyping it up. And so by the time I got back, I was itchy to get into the mountains, even though I was only a 9-year-old kid.
Were you in like the Denver area or further west in the mountains?
No, we were just in the Denver area trying to maintain good employment. It was always a difficult one for the family. So the mountains were right there, but it took a little bit more work to get there.
Yeah. Let me go back to this arthritis though. How old were you when you figured that out, that's what was going on?
I'm 38 right now. So if that had been 2019, well,
Wow. Like early
generous.
30s?
Yeah, it was early 30s. And that's apparently when it's supposed to hit. What I didn't know was that that was why I'd been pain for the past decade or so. So it was a really, I can't describe how terrified of an experience it was to think that I might not be able to ever walk again.
Yeah.
I would say I went into a depressive state, and I really struggled for a little bit. And I remember the exact moment when the doc said, "Oh no, we can get you running here pretty quickly." That was pretty magical to hear.
Wow.
I kind of based my entire life out of being able to go adventure and go have fun. So that moment was eye-opening.
So you had pursued adventure and outdoors activities and stuff even up to that point in your life?
I used to be a mountaineering guide in Colorado prior to all this law nonsense. And so one of the promises I made to myself when I went to law school is that it was not going to stop me from doing the adventure things that I'd always wanted to pursue. In fact, it would hopefully finance all this nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had just bought my mountaineering boots to go sign up for climbing Aconcagua when this had hit.
Jeez. Yeah, so it's not just the activity then, probably it was probably a bit of your identity wrapped around this is who I am, and then things conspire and go, no, this may not be who you are. So I think that is like the perfect recipe for a state of depression. So was the doctor right? Was it really as simple as just some good medicine and then the pain's gone and you can be back to normal?
For the most part, she stuck some needles into my kneecaps and pulled out huge amounts of fluid, which
Oh,
was
that sounds terrific.
one of the most enjoyable experiences I ever had was being able to move my leg for the first time in months. And I got to tell you, the favorite part of the whole thing was that she also gave me a steroid dump that day. And I went from not being able to walk to being able to ski. I think it was 8 inches of fresh powder the next day. And then 2 or 3 days later, the steroids came off and I couldn't walk again. But I knew there was
Oh,
that freedom that was going to happen again. And
yeah.
it was the best ski day I've ever had in my entire life.
That's fascinating. So like a glimpse of what was coming, but then it gets taken away again. How long was it after that was it like a progression that you got
Y-
better?
Yeah, it took, I would say, another 3 months before I was able to regularly walk anything more than, a few feet at a time. And that summer, my brother invited me to go to Europe with him and was the most generous human I've ever had with me. We walked, maybe a quarter mile. My feet had no muscle left. My legs had certainly lost quite a bit. And he just said nothing as I sat there and recovered. And then we keep going again. And that was about the time I started picking up the distance running. And now I'm in the 20 plus mile range, and hopefully I'm going to go do my first ultra this year.
Oh my gosh, man. So talk to me a little bit about the state of mind through that. So how long was it between thinking that you'd never walk again and the doctor saying no, there's actually hope? I mean,
Uh,
was it?
3 months, I want to say.
Oh
It
wow.
started with just swelling in my feet and then expanded up. The scary one is when my spine started swelling. And it was to the point where I struggled to even make it to the bathroom in the evening. That was a truly scary
Oh
experience.
my gosh.
And I knew I was going to be mentally okay. That it was the physically okay that it was just scary. I have a lot of dreams and goals for outdoor adventure, and it was a identity crisis at that point. I'm sure I wasn't the kindest person to be around, but I
Mm.
still had work and was able to make it there every day and go push and find new challenges even there. So I I was afraid, but I also knew that it might be a scenario where I just find a new avenue in life. But I'm very grateful for the medication that's out there. Now I just get a little bit more sick off more often. And the good news is my outdoor lifestyle had kind of set me up for success. A lot of the folks who have this condition, I have a psoriatic arthritis. It's similar
Sorry.
to other types of arthritis is out there with autoimmune diseases. And there's a lot of folks who kind of give up early because it's so painful and they end up sitting on a couch and it makes it worse. So the fact that I feel the need to go all the time actually helps me out quite a bit.
I see.
It hurts more, but not in a way that is unmanageable.
So it sounds like you've almost accepted that the hurt is part of your human experience at this point.
Absolutely. Sometimes I have to back off and I acknowledge it and kick myself a little bit more than I should, but I didn't get my full squat sets in at the gym on Monday, and I hurt a little bit more on that trail run yesterday than I wanted it to, but I enjoyed every minute of it because the alternative is much, much worse.
Well, and you've seen, like, you got close enough to that dark canvas to touch and feel it. So I would imagine that that makes the color of what you've been able to get to that much brighter. It's stuff I've heard before with like near death experiences also, and it's not just the carpe diem idea. There's something more significant when things very precious like life or movement or those kind of things get taken away from us. That everything else looks as it should, much rosier than maybe it had in the past. I am curious. So you said a minute ago, you knew you were going to be okay no matter which way it went. How did you know that?
There are more things to life than just the physicality, even though I'd say the most joy I've ever had out of that. I've been really lucky in my career to be able to go find really cool positions and to be trusted to be brought into brand new ones. So even if I couldn't move in the way that I'd want to, I knew that I could find joy in other areas. It was more of an identity crisis that got me into that depressive state. I think it was a trust in my own ability to find my way through, even if it's not going to be exactly what I wanted out of life.
So where does that come from? Because most people don't just wake up with that kind of trust in their own ability to maneuver through the world through hardship.
I feel like I lived this absolutely lucky, blessed life where I stumble on a lot of really cool experiences. I think my my parents brought us up pretty darn well to where we had the identity of going out and doing things and achieving. It was an expectation. It wasn't even a question. I
Hmm.
still lost my mom relatively early in life. I think it was 17 when she was diagnosed. And fortunately, she stayed around for a few more years. But knowing that there was more out of her life that she wished she could live, I remember her marching me down to the passport office to make sure I got a passport so I could go adventure and travel. And then I think that mentality of get it while you can has always
Mhm.
been in my brain. My parents weren't exactly happy when I announced I was going to college up in Alaska, even with my mom being ill, but there was a lot of support because there was that idea that I was pursuing the things that would bring me a ton of joy. That's actually how I ended up in Montana. Was we wanted to be a little bit closer to home and closer to my mom before she passed. So we settled on Montana as a happy median, and I've tried to leave for another decade or so, and I just keep getting drawn back in.
So you left. There's so much to what you just said. It's very rich. But you left home as a teenager and went effectively halfway around the world. I mean, Colorado to Alaska is not a short distance. You probably didn't know anybody there, I would
No,
imagine.
no,
Yeah.
never.
What pulled you there? Was it the snow, the mountains, the expansiveness? Why go that far away?
I knew that I wanted this outdoor adventure lifestyle, and I got it in my head that I could achieve it if I stuck myself in the right spot.
Mm.
It turned out it was harder there than anywhere else that I've lived to break in. And that was probably also because I was an 18-year-old kid who didn't know how
Yeah.
to break through, but I kept trying and kept pushing. And eventually I realized I needed to be closer to home. And I think that experience of just being able to go put myself in a new spot was enough to where I was able to achieve it the second time in Montana.
I see. And so the Alaska thing was, I mean, it sounds like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it was being pulled there rather than running away from something to get there.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I did learn how to ski up there at least. So that's got to count for something.
You didn't know how to ski and you lived in Colorado?
We grew up quite poor,
Oh,
so
wow.
maybe
Okay.
got 5 or 6 days of skiing in before I ever really moved. Before I put the effort in, college was a really great experience to where I could get out and go push on all of these, and then still pull out some
Get
loans
get the
and go
class.
figure
Yeah.
out the rest of the class thing.
Yeah, the class thing. Yeah. The thing that you got to do to try to make good grades and get through. And obviously you did okay and well enough to eventually get to law school and make your way through. But, so you've already talked about two different things that to me make there's a sense of grounding that I get from you that is only earned. Like you don't get it. And so growing up poor and fighting to, you know, uh, survive in a world where things aren't necessarily given to you, and then losing a parent at a very early age, those are two things that will put that weight into your feet, I think. Do you see it that way, or are those two things that you really feel are a part of give you the superpowers that you have now?
Yes, unabashedly, that those are incredibly important. I wish I had the words to describe the itchiness, the drive that got put into me. I think it was sometimes the parents just talking up the mountains in Colorado. I
Hmm.
think some of it was surrounding myself with outdoors folks who were always saying, here's this incredible thing that's out there. And the little voice in my head says, yeah, but what if? I never had to experience mountaineering growing up until someone at the Boy Scouts said, "Hey, why don't you come work at our mountaineering and teach how to use crampons and ice axes?" And I'd never even had those on me in my entire life. And once I got into that, it was, yeah, but what if I go and hit Kilimanjaro? What if I go and hit Aconcagua? So that is this great opportunity to just keep seeing more and more and more. And then it snowballs onto itself, and you start to realize, I think I can do all of these things. Nobody ever told me I shouldn't be doing them.
Hmm. So you didn't get a messaging that a negative messaging that you're internalized of I can't do certain things. It sounds like the sky was the limit from what you were surrounded with, and then these incremental gains, like you trying different things. I mean, it's really fascinating to me that it's somewhat that simple, that you didn't have the world handed to you, but really just kind of this right mixture in the pot of what's needed to give a young human being the wings to go out and try to figure out how to fly. Is there anything in the mountains at this point that you haven't done or that you feel like you really don't want to do or can't do?
The ice climbing is still a goal of mine. I would say it's
Okay.
by far my weakest area that I need to go put some effort into. The other fun one with the arthritis is that my hands just don't work like they used to. I finally rebuilt a lot of
Probably in the
muscle.
cold too, right? Is it worse in the
Yeah,
cold?
unfortunately, a little bit. And so I've been working to just rebuild muscle in the hands, and we're 5 years in. I'm still not quite at the climbing place. Unfortunately, my brother just overtook me on climbing skills after I'd say 20 years of me being the clearly superior climber. So I'm in the gym now and trying to
Work to do.
yeah, go out race this guy.
What are the age differences between you two?
He's 3 years older and I'm significantly more handsome.
As does the younger brother say. I'm the oldest of two other brothers, and they probably would say the same about me, and I wouldn't disagree. So
He's always been a inspiration on the fitness side. It took me a long time before I really found my oats in it, but I remember being I think it was a 13-year-old high school kid, and he came over in the weight room and said, "Come on, put some weight on that." And ever since then, it's been a go juice that I still remember that moment and still have it in my head whenever I put on weights.
yeah. Did you guys play sports growing up?
Poorly. Played a little bit of lacrosse. It was mostly just a time and money thing for my parents. We didn't really have the opportunities, but Boy Scouts was a huge component of just
I see.
you're expected to go outside, you're expected to be hiking and pushing, and then
Mhm.
working at summer camps gave that same opportunity to where I didn't have the traditional fitness experience, but I built those skills over time.
Yeah. Do you ever, when you're pushing hard, do you ever pay attention to w- the language that is bouncing between your ears, like the actual stories, the words that you're saying to yourself?
Yes. Lately, I've caught myself saying, "Come on, old man, let's go."
Hmm.
At 38,
Interesting.
maybe that's a bit of a misnomer, but I am mindful that the work I'm putting in now is going to pay off for the adventures that I want to do. There's that dichotomy between sitting in an office chair all day and then trying to go run a marathon that
Hmm.
evening.
Yeah.
And so I've been really fortunate with the fitness career. I ended up becoming a personal trainer as kind of a side job for group fitness classes after I finished law school.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
that has been a anchor to be able to go and do these incredible opportunities that have come out. But for the fitness and the work that I put in on a weekly basis, I wouldn't be able to go do half the things that I really want to go do. When I applied to law school, I also applied to Antarctica simultaneously to go guide. And I did not get in to Antarctica. I didn't qualify at all. It was just a shot in the
Mm.
dark because if they were willing to take me, I was going to go down. So I knew that there was really two options in life, and the more common sense option took me, thankfully.
So if Antarctica had said yes, your life might be a bit different than it is today.
I'd imagine I'd still be with the Penguins today.
Okay. What organization were you trying to go with, and what would you have been doing?
So Raytheon has a really cool science base for all the nerds down there. And so they need to be able to get them into the wilderness for scientific study and for play. And so they had a really interesting opportunity for a guide to be taking them out, planning activities, but also to be escorting them through the wilderness. I was absolutely not qualified at that point to be doing anything along those lines other than my time on glaciers. And even then, I had no idea what I was doing. I'm
Mm.
grateful that they did not take me.
Have you been to Antarctica since?
No, thank goodness. It is a dream bucket list for
It
me.
is. Okay.
My goal is to be able to go do some fun cross country skiing at the very least. There's a couple of really cool mountains down there that are very expensive to go climb.
Really?
So on the bucket list, but that and 10,000 other mountains.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of a guy named Colin O'Brady?
No.
He's done like some wild things, but I think one of the things that was the first that got him really popular was he wrote a book about it called The Impossible First, but he was the first solo supported trek across Antarctica. So pulling a 200 or 300 pound sled himself, not on skis, just walking. And turns out he was doing it at the same time as one other guy that was like this former military guy from Great Britain, I think, if I remember correctly. And so it was this, race to do it. But the book does a fascinating story of detailing what it was like. And I like those stories, and I want your take on this with your experience also. But I think challenge of pushing to and really beyond what are preconceived limits, you get to this kind of night of the soul moment of your brain or your body's telling your brain, we need to stop. This is dangerous. We're going to die. It's like a survival mechanism. And where the adventure becomes more a mental pursuit than a physical pursuit. I'm sure there's many things that you're physically able and capable and trained to do, but if the mental exercises hadn't been done in preparation, you likely don't finish. So talk to me a little bit about what that is like for you. And do you train that specifically, or is it something that you pay attention to when you're out?
I feel like this is similar to how I've done the rest of my life, where I've just kind of accidented my way into training for it. One of my proudest things I can report is that I've turned around on more mountains than I've ever climbed. I
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't risk past a point of discomfort where I say, this just doesn't belong. It doesn't feel right. I do a lot more mountaineering alone than I want to, just because it is difficult to find partners for every trip that you want to go on. And so I've been really willing to turn around, but that means that I think a better basis to be able to say, you know what, I think I can push through on this. I think I'm going to inch a little bit closer this time. Maybe I don't make it on this one. And that means you kind of start to feel for that. When can I keep pushing? And even if you've made a terrible decision and you shouldn't be out there, you know what that feels like to go a little bit further every single time. It's utterly shocking what the body is capable of doing when you don't have a choice.
Hmm. Do you intentionally put yourself in situations where the only way out is through? Like there are no other options?
And it's a phrase that I use a few more times than I
Really?
care
Okay.
to admit. Especially when I was guiding, it was a scenario where you just have to push through something difficult if you want to go get the crew into a happy space. One of my favorite moments was a crew for, I want to say it was Louisiana, going over a mountain pass this first day they'd ever been on snow, and there was just no way they could physically do it with their packs. So my decision was, I could get them over without their packs, but that means I'm going to haul each and every one of those myself. So I did the same mountain pass. I think it was like 8 times in a row, and or
Wow.
maybe it was 10 times, and it was genuinely one of the most enjoyable experiences. I didn't think I had that in me before that day, but turns out I did.
How about it? So with the stuff you do solo, are you looking for opportunities to, I don't know what the word is, but to be in that specific of a situation where, well, I guess maybe not, because you said you turn around more times than you go through. But what I'm really trying to get to is what exactly is it that you're figuring out when you do turn around or push through? What is it, a mantra? Is it just a gut feeling? And how do you know exactly when that is saying enough is enough?
I want to say that it's just a well-honed gut feeling that at a certain point you just look at the clouds, you look at the physicality where you're at, and have a bailout time, hopefully, where you say, I need to be back at this point at this place, and I'm not going to hit it otherwise. So there's kind of a series of checklists that I'm always
Okay.
checking against. And then, can I try and push on a little bit further? You never know what happens if you make it around that corner. Maybe it's a little bit easier than you expected. So even walking up to the difficult crux portion before you make that decision is key.
And that's something you said you've honed. I interviewed a guy in the last year on the podcast. His name's Robbie Linfesti. Done a lot of probably very similar mountaineering and trekking things that you've done in the past. And he talked about this idea of expanding your comfort zone. That
Mm.
if you don't expand, it atrophies and shrinks. But that if you expand too far or too fast, you blow through the comfort zone, blow through the growth zone, and end up in the death zone, right? Are you Are you specifically thinking about that as you're checking your gut and making the plan B options and going through your checklist? Are you thinking about where the death zone is and trying to stay in that growth spot?
That is so well articulated by him. I
Hmm.
wish I had that kind of verbal capacity. I'd be a dramatically better attorney. No, I think that that hit the nail on the head of a. Usually, my goal is to hit a mountain or to run a distance or to ski a line, and so if I can hit those, great. I think it's more of the ambition of hitting them. And then is that based in reality when I set out on the trip? I've also had enough scary experiences to where you just start to get the feel of when it's appropriate to turn around, whether it be lightning or just not having enough daylight to where you know you're going to be hiking out in some really, really rough conditions. So I think it's not as overt and intentional of saying, I really want to push my limits to grow. It's more of I really want to push up to this mountain if I can go hit it, and making that important call that my life and my safety and well-being is just not worth crossing that line to go achieve something. But then having that ambition to push just a little bit more is the
Mhm.
key to making these goals successes.
That's interesting. With the things that you do outside, you mentioned you've gotten into some scary situations. What are one or two that stand out above any of the others?
The only time I've ever had to send out a message that I might not be okay was North and South Arapahoe in Colorado. I used to guide the Indian Peaks Wilderness. Beautiful, beautiful area just south of Rocky Mountain National Park. It was actually supposed to be part of the park, but Congress apparently can't read maps, is the rumor that I understand. And so this beautiful mountain range that just isn't touched very often. To bag both one peak, you have to bag the other one. So you go up south, then you hit north, then you hit south again and head down. Hit south, looked great. Hit north, blue skies, and in the 30 minutes it took to cross back to south, death clouds of doom were coming overhead. And I realized I was about to get hit by a lightning storm when my ice axe over my shoulder started humming with the electricity in the air.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so I mean, this Colorado mountains don't have a lot of caves. I was able to jump down and find an overhang of a large rock. And for the first time that day, I happened to have cell phone service as the lightning started hitting the ridge line. And for 45 minutes, I could hear rock slides. I could hear just truly terrifying.
You were by
And
yourself?
by myself, people knew where I was at, but it was a moment of I might not pull out of this one. And here's where you find me if I don't come out. It was terrifying.
Wow. Was it one of the typical Colorado summer storms where it's violent and quick and within a little bit it's back to blue skies again?
I would say 45 minutes and it was gone. And even then, I hung out there for a little bit longer to make sure that once the clouds were out, that I was relatively safe. And the fun one is I took out a crew the next day guiding again and had to just keep rolling through. One of the reasons I'm glad I stopped guiding is because I was genuinely afraid I'd harmed someone in the process. The people that can do this professionally are just incredible human beings who have to disassociate the immediate risk and the group of people that might try and harm themselves without meaning to, with the adventure and the gift that is given by taking them out.
Wow. How long did you do the guiding?
So I got to do it for 5 seasons. So I live in Montana, come back down to Colorado in the summer, and I ended it by applying to law school. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it
I
was
guess
it
law
was
school has a way of changing a lot of things in life.
very much.
Yeah. And where'd you go to law school?
Here in Montana, University of Montana School of Law, that's over in Missoula. I did my undergrad at Bozeman and Montana State University. So the whole state is mine from the way I view it. And
I
now I'm in
see.
the capital here in Helena. And it's been really cool. Now I'm finally established in my career. I can take a little bit more time off. I went to Argentina last year and got to go climb Aconcagua this year. I somehow convinced them to let me bank a year's worth of vacation and then do comp time. And I got to travel the world. And one of my buddies gave me a flight pass, a buddy pass. So this has been a year of 2024 was a year of adventure and travel. So it's been a really great experience
Wow.
to attorney and fulfill all the life adventure dreams.
So talk to me a little bit about that. That was calendar year 2024.
Yep, he gave it to me from January 1st to December 31st. He gave me a heads up in 2023 that he was going to do this very, very generous gift. And I told him, I'm going to use this thing. I'm going to abuse this thing. And I don't think he believed me up until my third continent. And then he said, we might need to talk about how much this is going to cost me in taxes. They have
Oh,
to
it
pay
costs
tax.
him money?
A little bit. He has to pay a little bit
Interesting.
of taxes on the flights. It's a smaller amount, but
Yeah.
enough that we had to have that conversation about how I could be a bit more helpful on that. It was truly one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. I got to go back to countries where I missed trail runs or missed out on a couple mountains and go bag them in ways that I hadn't before. And then I also got to meet really wonderful people along the way. Tim was one of your previous guests, and he and I got to go climb Ayambe in Ecuador. One of the coolest
Mm.
experiences I've ever had in meeting really, really powerful, unique people in their own life, and then stick us all together in a group and head on up a mountainside.
Yeah, I am picturing your group. For anyone that's interested, episode 18 was with Tim Matthews, a retired Navy admiral who now, among other things, spends his time pursuing his own adventures. And so if that group was a mixture of you and him and other people like you guys, that would be probably a pretty fun group to be climbing a mountain with. And so what were talk to me a little bit about the highlights from last year then. How much did you work? How much did you travel? How did that all work?
I was very lucky with my work. Fortunately, I'd already taken a month off to go climb Aconcagua in 2023. So they saw that I could do this. I have a
Mm.
relatively unique job where I do whatever I feel like I can. Nobody's really looking over my shoulder, and I've proven over the years that I'm probably too aggressive on taking on more cases than I need to. And so they gave me a lot of rope to go hang myself with. Said, work weekends if you need it. So I maxed out on my vacation. It's gone. I maxed out on my comp time. It's gone. But I got to hit 5 continents. New Zealand is a place I'm just going to keep going back to over and over again. The Julian Alps in Eastern Europe, so that goes down through Slovenia, are just incredible. So I missed out on a mountain due to a snowstorm once upon a time, and got to go hit Triglav under wonderful conditions. Ecuador is this place that I had never really put a lot of thought into until I signed up to go climb it, and that was one of my good friends who went to Aconcagua with me had unfortunately come down with a pretty severe medical diagnosis and had just came out of it. And so he joined on the Ecuador trip. We're trying to gear him back up to hopefully be fit enough to go do a big mountain. We're looking at Denali in 2026.
Wow.
And so getting him that experience was going to be a big deal. And I mean, what a magical idea that I can go travel the world and see my brother in Hong Kong and see friends that I haven't seen in Germany in forever. I pushed hard and was able to see 5 continents out of the world. Do it again in a heartbeat, but my finances say I can't.
Well, as a financial planner in my day job, my brain's always thinking about, well, how did you finance this? How did you plan and what's cash flow look like and before and after? And I would imagine you probably put the same amount of effort into the planning of the finances as you do the planning of the routes and the treks themselves. So was that difficult? Talk to me a little bit about what that was like to financially be prepared for something like that.
That was one of the first times I've ever decided to lay into my savings. I grew up
Mm.
quite not hand to mouth or anything, but certainly not used to having any sort of savings account. So
Mhm.
I've been really fortunate with my career and my life to where I've finally been able to put money aside. Hopefully I get my loans forgiven this year after working for the government for 10 years. And so I knew that I would be in an okay place to stretch a little bit
Mhm.
and tap into the savings accounts that I had. I mean, what's the point of having an emergency fund if you can't use it for
Mm.
something truly unique like this. This is going to be a really hard year. This is a recovery year. I'm hopefully gearing up for an important relationship. And so I'm trying to put money aside for that. The day before our new president changed the name of Denali, I opened up a fund called Denali Fund. So
Okay.
there's a lot of prior planning that I'm trying to put into this. The other one is I do travel as cheap as I possibly
Do
can.
you?
Living, I got to travel to a lot of countries when I just got out of law school, and that was by sleeping in a tent for the vast majority of the time. The cities are wonderful places to go visit, but I'm really traveling to go hit the adventure stuff. And it turns out you really don't need to spend a ton of money to go do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can spend a ton of money doing those
Absolutely.
things, but I love hearing that you've found a way to make it work within your means. And I think that's financial success for anyone. It's not having a certain dollar amount in a bank account. It's maximizing what you have within the means that you get. And that's different for all of us. And so that's super encouraging and inspiring to hear those details that you were intentional with. And I think that word intentional is something I've thought a lot about and talked a lot about in the past year or two in trying to live life intentionally, especially I'm in my mid 40s. At this point, it's very easy for me to get swept up into the things that are going on, and years go by and you're like, man, that's been years. And I have, but everything you've described is a great deal of intentionality at whatever you're trying to achieve. And you tell me if I'm off on this, but it really seems like you view your job as the financial engine to everything else. And maybe it's more than that to you, but I mean, it really seems like you've built life around this financial engine to be able to do these things.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And sometimes I feel like I've just stupided my way into this success. It, I reached out. I went to law school. I grew up knowing that I was just going to be poor forever, and so it was the idea I'll just be a teacher. Turns out I just don't like teaching, and so I sat back and said, well, what would bring me a lot of joy? And I kind of figured out that reading and writing and arguing was really up my alley.
Hmm.
And then I've been really lucky with my career path. Part of this comes from the guiding of knowing that who I work with matters a ton more than what I'm actually doing. And so I've been able to push myself into the right area where I can challenge myself in the courtroom, really have control over my own work. And then I'm still making really a great income. It's not as much as if I went private, but that's not really where I want to go as long as I'm able to hit the goals that I want. I've been spending a ton of time on my finances the past couple of years now, trying to be as forward thinking as I can. And it's not all gone the way that I want. And, I'll do a shameless plug here. I actually just started looking at your newsletter, and I really appreciate anyone who's trying to say, what does it look like to go do these adventures and have a life outside? I'm looking down the barrel of hopefully having a family here in the near future. And to anyone that does it, I want to know everything that there is out there. How do you maintain these lifestyles while also trying to fund children and
Yeah.
teach them to be humans? Oof, terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying, and it ain't for the faint of heart either. Just like climbing mountains isn't. And I would give you, if this is encouraging at all, like what I highlighted earlier is that this mental attitude that you have, and to get through these challenges, like you didn't just wake up one day and have that ability. You didn't just wake up one day and have the spidey senses that this is dangerous, right? I mean, you built your way and you worked your way to that. Your family adventures are going to be the same way. Like day one, you're not going to know jack, right? And you're going to stumble and figure it out, and then a year in it, you're gonna have a little bit more spidey sense around that, and the more you go, it just builds on itself. And I think the other thing that you're going to, and I've interviewed several people that have this very similar story, is, kids change everything, but that's there's beauty and excitement in that you don't have to give up the adventure side. You just have more people to do it with at that point. And I would imagine there's probably something interesting in that for you as well, that not just doing these things for yourself and for your own gain, but to be passing that as a legacy to another generation. There's something really, really invaluable to that.
I didn't realize this was going to turn into a therapy session, but I love it. This
You
is
didn't, you
exactly
haven't,
what I was looking for.
you haven't listened to enough of these, because one way or the other, and it's usually not come from me. People I've interviewed will say stuff like, "Man, that is good therapy right there." So anything that I'm espousing, I have learned or stolen from somebody else. But I think it's true. Life is the adventure that you want to make it. And the whole point that I'm still doing these podcast conversations is because I am very interested in how people are doing this. And I want to highlight the way that people are living their great life right now. Right. As a financial planner, I am not interested in helping people build bigger buckets just for the sake of a bigger bucket. There's no value in that. There's no significance in that. But if you can leverage your money to live your great life right now, in whatever way that means, that's super valuable. And again, like you've figured this out, that using your values as the filter that you're making your financial decisions through, that's graduate level financial planning. That is the way that it's supposed to be done when you're doing it really well. Rather than just focusing on, well, what's the right money move, or how do I maximize my rate of return? Those kinds of conversations are the tail wagging the dog, and ultimately don't lead to a fruitful, valuable life. And so hopefully these conversations get to that. And I know you've done a great job highlighting how you've integrated all of this in your life and decisions along the way. So far you've mentioned Aconcagua, you've mentioned Kilimanjaro. What other of the big peaks do you have on the list to do?
So still haven't done Kili. Kili is on my list.
Oh, you
I'm
haven't done
saving.
Kili. Okay.
No. That was my first like introduction of like, I think I want to go do that. And then I quickly realized that's a difficult mountain, but one that's a bit more achievable. And so I'm saving that as my old man mountain is what I call it.
Yeah.
The hope is
Non-technical.
exactly. And the hope
Yeah.
is maybe I get a partner and maybe some kiddos up that and do that as a magical experience. So recently just climbed Cayambe with Tim down in Ecuador. It's 4 feet short of 19,000 feet. I've taken quite a few pot shots at the Grand Teton and had to turn around because of weather every single time. And it's
Really?
driving me nuts. And then it's been a lot of really smaller peaks. Colorado 14ers are obviously a go-to, but the 13ers are kind of where it's at. You don't have to deal with people. You can get into some insane terrain. And then the Montana mountain ranges. I've been doing this for I think it's 19 years now. And I haven't even scratched the surface on some of these no-name peaks that are difficult, intense, and downright scary sometimes. There's an endless treasure trove of wonderful things. I think it was 2 podcasts ago you were talking about Glacier, which is a mind-boggling place to exist in this world. And then just down south of there are the Mission Mountains. And if you're going to go to the Missions, you got to get into the Swans. And the Cabinet Range is just around the corner. And oh my gosh, there's just endless supply of adventure and fun to be had. So one of these days I'll bag every peak here and I'll be able to leave. But I think I'm going to be about 200 or 250 around that age.
So it sounds like you're really going more for, maximizing the local pursuits rather than taking other places around the globe.
I think that I still got some big ones ahead of me. Hopefully Denali is next year. That's the big goal. And I've fallen into the trap and I've already said, you know what? If I feel comfortable on Denali, Nepal doesn't sound that bad. I mean, you've already been up pretty high. So I've kind of got Manaslu. I'm probably butchering the name of that poor mountain
I think that's right.
As the next big one that I'd be really interested in. Ski mountaineering is going to be a thing. I think it just goes back to those early days realizing that life is a finite resource. I got to watch my mom pass before she was ready to go. And it's the phrase that I use quite a bit is, you're going to die someday, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to try and hit what I can while I can. I'm excited with a new partner to show the world as I see it, and hopefully gets a good adventure partner in there, and hopefully get to do the same with kiddos one of these days too.
Yeah, that's cool. I am listening to a book right now called Camping with Kierkegaard, which a lot of kind of philosophy in it. But one of the phrases in the book is what's worthy of your finitude. So recognizing that we are finite, right? And that's not bad, but what's worthy of that finitude? And I've really kind of been mulling on that idea. And so back to the big mountains, there, I would love to introduce you. One of my previous guests that I've gotten to know is a guy named Matt Walker. He actually lives out in Montana. Can't remember the name of town. He's a mountain guide, does a lot of cool stuff, not only out west, but he's also a trained psychologist. So you kind of get therapy and mountain guide all together, which is pretty cool. He's taking a group to Kilimanjaro next December. The other guy that I would love to connect you with is episode 22 that I interviewed Kenton Cool, who's a big mountain guide. And he actually holds the non-Sherpa record for most summits of Everest. He did his 18th last year, but he was also the first to do the Triple Crown of Everest, Lhotse, and Nuptse.
Wow.
In one push. He's done K2. I believe he's done Manaslu. He's done a lot of stuff in the Alps, and a great guy. Like I met him through somebody else, and by the end of an hour and a half conversation with him, I might as well have known him my whole life. He would be a great guide for anything out in that range if you were interested. So
An introduction would be appreciated.
yes.
And I think I've got a couple podcasts that I need to go download here as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Including Robbie Limfestis. He's number 21 right before Kenton. So that's another good one. I'm a financial planner. These aren't people that I would normally come across, but because I've got this platform and I like talking about these things, an introduction here and an introduction there, I have met more people in the last 2 years that I never, ever would have come across. And it's been fascinating.
Well, I think that, and you might disagree with me on this, the folks who do this, though, are always looking for that other person that they can bounce this off of. It's a smaller community of people that think that going out and suffering in type 2 and sometimes type 3 fun is the way that they want to spend their lives. And I don't know if we gravitate towards each other, but we all certainly want to go compare notes and figure out how on earth somebody else is managing this.
Yeah, and I think you walk away from these conversations going, yeah, that's my kind of person. We're cut from the same cloth, different, grew up in different areas, different parts of the world, but still same, and describe to me, you said something there I'm not familiar with, type 2 and type 3 adventures. What does that mean?
Okay, so type 1 fun is the roller coaster where you get to go through it. You say we is fun in the moment. Type 2 fun is where it's a struggle. You're pushing. It might not be fun in the moment. When you look back at it, you say, that was a really good time. Type 3 fun is when you're miserable in the moment. You look back at it and you say, that was a terrible, terrible experience. I never want to do anything like that at all.
Yeah, but when those times you've had the type 3 fun, is it not just like a matter of moments before you're like planning the next one?
Absolutely. And I try to live right between that type 2 and type 3 fun. It seems to be my happy spot where I can find centered self. There's something, I don't know, transcendental almost, where you're so removed from the day-to-day life and so centered in nature that you can truly feel like you're alive and go back and say, the dishwasher didn't get emptied, but I really don't mind at all because I'm here to go empty a dishwasher. And that's a pretty cool experience to say everything's in context.
Yeah. Yeah. So and you might have just hit on this in what you were just saying, but I have this thought, and I would love for somebody to tell me I'm not as smart as I think I am, but the human being as a species, that we generally don't do anything unless there's a reward. And so I interview all these people that are doing all these hard things, type 3 fun, maybe type 4 experiences where it's like It shouldn't be alive after that. And yet it's within minutes. We're all planning the next thing. They're planning the next time to put themselves in that. And I wonder, why do we suffer and choose difficulty over and over again? What's the reward is what I'm getting at. What is it for you? What is it that you get out of these things that keeps drawing you back into finding that line between type 2 and type 3?
For if you edited that, just tell everyone I sat there for about 5 minutes, because that is a hard question. That my first thought is the joke when you said the guy who climbed Everest 18 times,
Hmm.
who hurt him? You're working through something there. But I think there is,
You know what his answer to that question was?
what's that?
The sunset. No,
Uh,
I'm sorry. The sunrise.
mm.
Climbing to the top of Everest in the middle of the night to get to the sunrise. And he does, I'm not even going to try, but the way he described that moment as transcendental, as a spiritual thing that he doesn't get anywhere else, that's why he keeps doing it.
So, I'm going to Ed Abbey quotes, I'm going to John Muir quotes, and all of them are touching on this idea of actually living life. The couch is the thing that'll kill you the fastest. And I think that these are the moments where you can find yourself and to be grounded in reality as you're surrounded with awe and wonder. There are mornings, and I don't know why he's right on this, but mornings on glaciers are mind-boggling. I distinctly remember the sun hitting Mount Hood, the very, very tip of it, as I'm about to summit it. I think it was 2 years ago or so, and I just teared up. Like I can't tell
Hmm.
you why that wonder and awe is there at that sunrise when it first hits, but it is. All I can tell you is that I've never felt so alive when I'm so close to death or feeling like I want to die. And I don't think I have the words to be able to go articulate that awe that is out there, but that they are the most meaningful experiences. And I think I'm going to chase that until the arthritis overtakes me or I die of a healthy old age.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you highlighted wonder and awe. Those are two emotions. I don't know if you call them emotions. They're two things that are very difficult to describe, but you know when you're in them. And I think to a person, everybody I've interviewed doing these things hits that. And there's something really special about being in a moment where you just feel really small and and feel the insignificance of your finitude and putting that as a highlight to feel fully alive. I think you did a great job explaining that. And
Well, can you give us a moment from where you felt that? I mean, that's a, I can think of four moments off the top of my head where it's visceral even to this day. Do you have one that you're thinking of in particular?
yeah, I haven't done anything as big mountain extremes as you have. A lot of the outdoor stuff I've done on the East Coast is on the Appalachian Trail or
Mm.
around it, and it can be a bit of a green tunnel at times. But there's one spot where I believe this is the section where the AT crosses over the Art Loeb Trail, which is another wilderness trail, and it's across two mountains that are bald. One's called Tennant Mountain, one's called Black Balsam Knob. And elevation wise, you're not very high, but you're higher than everything else around. And so you see the Blue Ridge Mountains everywhere you turn because you're high. So a buddy of mine were doing this backpacking trip probably 4 or 5 years ago. And we were camping on top of one of those, extremely annoyed by the amount of people that were up there because it's close enough to a fire service road that you could get there without a whole lot of work. But we woke up early that next morning. And in fact, I woke up to an earthquake. in in the mountains in North Carolina. It wasn't a big one, but we were at the top of this knob, and the tents were blowing with the wind coming over. But then it was like this shake, and I thought, man, that is some gusty wind. But it kept rattling, and I didn't think anything of it. It was just like that. And then the wind kind of died down, the quote unquote wind, and didn't really think anything of it. Unzipped the tent and got out and looked, and you're above clouds, and the sun's coming up. And I'm getting to your question, but that was one of the moments where I can picture the clouds even now, like very succinctly in my mind. I can feel the wind and the temperature and the grass blowing. And we left the trail a couple days later, and as we got back into civilization, read the headlines that there had been an earthquake in the mountains of North Carolina. I'm like, that's what it was. It was Sunday morning. We woke up to an earthquake. And between that of, experiencing the earth shaking in a very small way and being above, civilization and creation and looking down on it, that was a very distinct feeling of awe and wonder. And it's certainly one of those that I keep going, yeah, I got to get more of that. I got to get more of that. And I can resonate with what you're saying, that it's those moments where you do feel fully alive. And I don't have a cell phone in my hand. I'm not sitting in front of a computer. There's no ball games to watch. You just kind of strip all of modern day society away, and you're down to you're down to creation, right? You're down to the things that have been here longer than any of us. And it's pretty special. And, between that and between talking to guys like you and gals that are doing some wild stuff around the globe, it just is a reminder to me, I got to do more of this. I am not personally intentional enough to build these kind of things. And so these conversations are, continual kicks in the butt to make sure that this is a priority.
Well, you just gave me a new place to go, so that's exciting.
Yeah, the ATs, for anybody that's not from around the East Coast, it is an unusually difficult hike. You wouldn't think, the Appalachian Mountains aren't steep, but they have what some of us call PUDs, pointless up and downs, just this continual up and down where you do get quite a bit of elevation gain in a short period of time. And you're always climbing up to, some false summit. But because of the ups and downs, you have these continual vistas, and the scenery changes quite drastically from Georgia. Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee are really, really unique. That's where I've spent most of the time. Virginia through the Shenandoahs is cool. Then you get, Maryland and Pennsylvania. Those are unique in their own way. Pennsylvania is basically known for its rocks and boulders. You're just hiking over that. And then you get up into New England and in the White Mountains. And again, like steeper and fairly dangerous at times. And you wouldn't think about it, it being that kind of thing in the eastern United States. But the Whites, and specifically Mount Washington in the Whites, is where I believe the coldest recorded temperature in the continental U.S. is at the top of that mountain. And some very, very violent storms rip through there. But the AT, and you may have, actually, you mentioned this with the people that you adventure with. The people are pretty unique, and people on the Appalachian Trail, whether they're through hikers or section hikers, again, you're like, man, these are my kind of people, and haven't met a bad one yet. Although there are some not great folks that have been on the trail and done some not great things, but for the most part, it's a pretty unique community. So, and I skipped over this question a minute ago, so I don't want to end without asking you this, but tell me a little bit about the people that you have been around whether it's traveling the world in a year or doing a specific mountain. Are the people part of the adventure for you, or is that icing on the cake?
I think you might have picked up on it, but I kind of like to talk to folks. It is interestingly, I've developed both an introvert and an extrovert battery. I only walked into this life with an extrovert one, but spending so much time alone in the woods, I've actually come to value it as equally as being with amazing people. And the folks that you meet out there tend to be distilled down to the very best of humanity. They are there because they
I
want to
like
be
that.
there. They want to be there. They want to go experience something unique. And they might be, a brand new novice, and they're still just there for the experience. So it's everybody at their very best. My first year of guiding, this was a maybe not as well put together organization as it should have been. And it was before the days where GPS were actually relatively affordable. And so the theory was, if you're coming down the trail with an injured client, you're asking for help. And uniformly, whenever it was usually altitude sickness where we had to pull people off, but it wasn't even a question. People said, "Oh, I've got service around the corner. Let me go run and try and help out." And then you just meet these random people who are trying to have these great adventures. One of my favorite moments was right after law school. I got to go to Europe, and I took some dogs over for the military, so they got a free plane trip over it.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
it was dumb luck. I think I've lucked my way into everything here so far. And was in Croatia, met some random people from across the world. And somebody said, I hear there's really a great hike over in Montenegro. Anybody want to pile into a car? And a bunch of strangers I'd never met before drove a couple countries over so we could hike up a mountainside and have a block of cheese from a lady who spoke no English. And it was just one of those magical experiences you only get when everybody really wants to go have a great time.
Hmm.
Same for mountaineering, same for skiing. It brings out the best in us.
Yeah. Would you say it would have been a totally different experience if you had done that same thing, but had done it by yourself?
Yes, I can't imagine taking that big of a jump without having a few other people saying, you know what, that sounds like a really good time too. And it's been really awesome. Now that I'm a little bit older and can afford it, I've been paying for guiding treks up the big mountains, and you get to meet just the coolest people on earth. I'm already starting to count one or two of them as lifelong friends, and that
That's
is
cool.
a magical experience to be able to bring in lots of people. I've made it a big effort to invite those who are interested, because I had that same luck as a kid. When I was learning how to ski, my friends would sit at the bottom of the hill and not say a single word as I fell my way down the greens and the blues. And now I'm doing my best to pay it forward with anyone who wants to go learn.
When you hike up these bigger mountains, are you skiing down most of them, or are you going to hike back down?
Mostly hike. If I can skin up and ski down, I will, but most of them are hiking or running up nowadays. The
Mhm.
skiing is still a little scary to me. Yeah, I've been through my avalanche courses and practicing, but there's still a lot more risk involved with them. And until I'm extremely confident, I'm not going to be pushing past those limits.
Yeah, for sure. But Patrick, this has been a real joy for me to ask these questions and sit back and listen to your experience. And again, like you grew up in a totally different part of the United States than I grew up in, and it's very encouraging and inspiring for me to hear how you're finding these things to build into your life as a priority. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and maybe one of these days our paths will cross in person and do something outside.
I would really appreciate that. Sounds like we've got some mutual interests, and I'll see if I can get us out west and get you out west and show you some new trails.
That sounds great. Okay. Man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.